Chicago, 1928. The city of broad shoulders, a metropolis of steel and smoke, hums with an energy that's part exhilaration, part desperation. It's a city divided, not just by its iconic river, but by the invisible lines of power that crisscross its streets like a web. And at the center of this web, a spider sits, his legs stretching out to every corner, his influence inescapable. His name is Al Capone. In the heart of the city, a man lies dead in an alley, his body riddled with bullets. Another casualty in the war that's been raging for years, a war that Capone has all but won. But this isn't the beginning of our story. No, we're going to start at the end, with Capone at the height of his power, because to understand how he got here, we need to go back. Back to the roots of his empire, back to the birth of the city's underworld. Chicago, 1920. The city is a different beast then, a place of promise and possibility. The Great War is over, and the world is changing. Prohibition has just been enacted, and with it, a new kind of crime lord is about to rise. Al Capone is just a small-time hood then, a bouncer at a South Side speakeasy, but he's got ambition. He's got a hunger for power that's as insatiable as the city's appetite for vice. Speakeasies are popping up like weeds, hidden behind false fronts and secret knocks. The city is alive with the thrill of the illicit, the forbidden. And Capone, with his charisma and his connections, starts to make a name for himself. He's not just a bouncer anymore. He's a man to be reckoned with. But Capone's not the only one with eyes on the city's underworld. There are others, older, more established. Men like Johnny Torrio, Capone's mentor, and Big Jim Colosimo, the city's first crime lord. They see the potential in Capone, but they also see a threat. Because Capone, he's not afraid to get his hands dirty. He's not afraid to do what needs to be done, no matter how brutal, no matter how bloody. In 1924, Colosimo is gunned down in his own brothel, a warning shot to anyone who thinks they can challenge Capone's rise. The city holds its breath, waiting for the backlash, waiting for the war to begin. But Capone, he's smart. He knows that to take over, he needs to be more than just a gangster. He needs to be a businessman. He needs to be untouchable. Capone starts to clean up the city to make it his own. He takes out his rivals, one by one, until he's the only one left standing. He takes control of the breweries, the speakeasies, the brothels. He taxes the city's vice, making it his own. He becomes the city's shadow government, its invisible king. And the city, it loves him for it. Because Capone, he's not just a gangster. He's a provider. He's a protector. He's a symbol of the city's defiance, its refusal to be cowed by the law. But with power comes a price. The law, they're not so easily bought off. They're not so easily ignored. And so, in 1925, Capone is arrested, charged with vice offenses. But he's untouchable, or so he thinks. He's acquitted, the city breathing a sigh of relief. But the law, they're not done with him yet. They're not done with Chicago yet. And so, we come full circle, back to 1928, back to the man in the alley, back to the war that's been raging for years. Because Capone, he's not invincible. He's not untouchable. The law, they're coming for him. They're coming for his empire. And the city, it's about to change again. But that, dear listener, is a story for another time. For now, let's leave Capone in his prime. Let's leave him at the height of his power. Let's leave him as the king of Chicago, because soon, very soon, the throne is going to be challenged. And the city, it's going to bleed. The city was a powder keg, ready to explode. Capone's acquittal had been a temporary reprieve, a moment of celebration that was already fading into memory. The law was still out there, still breathing down his neck, still hungry for his blood. And Capone, he wasn't the type to rest on his laurels. He knew that the only way to stay ahead was to keep moving, to keep expanding, to keep tightening his grip on the city. He started to diversify his operations, to spread his influence like a disease. He moved into bootlegging, setting up stills in remote locations, importing liquor from Canada and the Caribbean. He muscled in on the numbers racket, the illegal lottery that was a lifeline for the city's poor. He even dipped his toes into labor racketeering, seeing an opportunity to control the city's unions, to squeeze the life out of its industries. But with each new venture, Capone was making enemies. The outfit, the old guard of Chicago's underworld, they didn't take kindly to an upstart like Capone muscling in on their territory. They saw him as a threat, a wild card, a loose cannon. And they were right. Capone was all of those things and more. He was a force of nature, a storm that was sweeping through the city, leaving chaos and opportunity in its wake. The first sign of trouble came in 1929. Capone was in Florida, laying low, enjoying the sun and the sand. He was trying to stay out of the limelight, to let the heat die down. But the outfit, they weren't going to let him rest. They saw an opportunity, a chance to strike while he was away, to cut the head off the snake. They sent word to Capone's lieutenants, to his enforcers. They told them to stand down, to let the outfit take over. But Capone's men, they were loyal. They were fierce. They were ready for a fight. And so, the war began. The first shots were fired in a speakeasy on the south side. A group of Capone's men were gunned down, their bodies left to rot in the alley behind the bar. Capone, he got the message. He cut his vacation short. He rushed back to Chicago. He was ready for a fight. He hit back hard, striking at the heart of the outfit. He took out their leaders, their enforcers, their soldiers. He sent a message, loud and clear. He wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't backing down. He was the king of Chicago, and he was ready to defend his throne. The city was in chaos. The streets were running red with blood. The law, they were trying to intervene, but they were outmatched, outgunned. They were fighting a losing battle, a war they couldn't win. And Capone, he was untouchable. He was invincible. He was a force of nature, a storm that was sweeping through the city, leaving destruction in its wake. But even storms run out of steam eventually. Even kings can be toppled from their thrones. And Capone, he was starting to show cracks. He was starting to show signs of wear. The war was taking its toll, the stress, the pressure, the constant state of alert. He was starting to make mistakes, to let his guard down. And that's when the law saw their chance. They saw an opportunity to strike, to take Capone down once and for all. They started to build their case, to gather their evidence. They started to close in, to tighten the noose. They were coming for Capone, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. The end was coming, the reckoning was near. The king of Chicago was about to fall, his empire was about to crumble. But Capone, he wasn't going to go down without a fight. He wasn't going to make it easy for them. He was going to make them work for it, make them bleed for it. He was going to make them remember the name Al Capone, the man who ruled Chicago with an iron fist. But that, dear listener, is a story for another time. For now, let's leave Capone on the eve of his downfall. Let's leave him on the precipice of his fate. Let's leave him as the king of Chicago, because soon, very soon, the throne is going to be challenged. And the city, it's going to bleed. In the grimy, smoke-filled back room of a South Side speakeasy, Al Capone sat hunched over a table strewn with maps and photographs. His eyes, once fiery and intense, were now dull and heavy, etched with the lines of sleepless nights and endless worry. The war with the outfit had taken its toll, and it showed in every crease of his face, every slump of his shoulders. But his hands, they were steady as he rolled a cigarette, his fingers moving with a precision honed by years of practice and tension. The door creaked open, and one of Capone's lieutenants slipped inside, his face pale and drawn. "Boss," he whispered, "they've hit the brewery. It's gone, Al. They torched it." Capone's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with a sudden, fierce anger. "The brewery?" he growled. "That was our lifeblood, you idiots! How could you let this happen?" The lieutenant shrank back, his voice barely audible. "We're sorry, boss. We tried to stop them, but they were everywhere. It was like they knew we were coming." Capone slammed his fist on the table, sending maps and photographs flying. "Of course they knew, you fool. They've been one step ahead of us this entire time. We've been playing into their hands, and I've been too blind to see it." He stood up, his chair screeching back across the wooden floor. He paced the room, his mind racing, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel it, the noose tightening around his neck, the walls closing in. They were coming for him, and he had nothing left to fight with. His empire was crumbling, his men were falling, and he was standing alone in the wreckage. Suddenly, he stopped pacing, his eyes widening as a thought occurred to him. He turned to his lieutenant, a grim smile spreading across his face. "The brewery," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "That's it. That's the key to ending this war once and for all." The lieutenant looked at him, confusion written all over his face. "But boss, it's gone. They torched it, remember?" Capone shook his head, his smile growing wider, more manic. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, we let them think it's gone. We let them think they've won. And then, when they least expect it, we hit them where it hurts. We hit them so hard, they'll never see it coming." The lieutenant nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The brewery," he said, a note of awe in his voice. "You want to use it as bait." Capone nodded, his eyes gleaming with a newfound intensity. "Exactly. We'll rebuild it, make it look like we're starting from scratch. We'll make them think we're weak, that we're beaten. And then, when they come for the kill, we'll be ready. We'll be waiting." And so, the plan was set in motion. Capone and his men worked tirelessly, rebuilding the brewery in secret, laying low, biding their time. Meanwhile, the outfit celebrated their victory, their leaders growing complacent, their guards growing lax. They thought they had won, that Capone was beaten, that the war was over. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. The night of the reckoning arrived, a dark and stormy night that seemed to mirror the mood of the city. The brewery stood tall and proud, a beacon of defiance in the heart of Chicago. Capone and his men were hidden inside, their guns loaded, their hearts pounding with anticipation. They were ready. They were waiting. And then they came. The outfit, thinking they were striking the final blow, swarmed the brewery, their guns blazing, their voices shouting in triumph. But their triumph was short-lived. As they stormed the building, they were met with a hail of gunfire, a wall of lead that cut them down like wheat before a scythe. Capone emerged from his hiding place, his gun smoking, his eyes cold and hard. He walked through the carnage, his boots crunching on the broken glass and twisted metal. He found their leader, their boss, their king, lying on the floor, his body riddled with bullets, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Capone stood over him, looking down at the man who had once been his equal, his rival, his enemy. He raised his gun, pointed it at the man's head, and pulled the trigger. The echo of the shot rang out, a final, definitive note in the symphony of violence that had been playing out in Chicago for years. And then it was over. The war was won, the enemy was defeated, and Al Capone stood victorious, the undisputed king of Chicago. But as he looked around at the carnage, at the bodies of his enemies and his friends, at the brewery that had cost him so much, he felt no joy, no triumph. He felt only emptiness, only a profound and bone-deep weariness. He had won, yes, but at what cost? What had this war, this fight for power, for territory, for respect, what had it all been for? He walked out of the brewery, into the cold, dark night, and looked out over the city that he had fought so hard to control. And he wondered, as the rain began to fall, as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, he wondered what it was all for. He wondered if it had been worth it, if the price he had paid, the lives he had taken, the lives he had lost, if it had all been for nothing. And as he stood there, alone in the rain, the king of Chicago, the man who had ruled with an iron fist, he knew, with a sudden and terrible certainty, that it had all been for nothing. That the city he had fought so hard to control, the empire he had built, the legacy he had left behind, it would all crumble to dust, it would all be forgotten, it would all be for nothing. And so, dear listener, we leave Al Capone on that fateful night, standing alone in the rain, his heart heavy, his soul weary, his dreams shattered. We leave him as the king of Chicago, the man who had ruled with an iron fist, the man who had fought and won the greatest war of his generation. But we also leave him with a question that haunts us still, a question that echoes through the annals of history, a question that asks us all, in the end, what it was all for. What was it all for, Al Capone? What was it all for?